Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first of hopefully many webinars, interactive webinars given by the American Sephardi Federation Institute for Jewish Experience. Today's webinar, the American Sephardi Federation Institute for Jewish Experience Travels in Jewish History presents Experience Egypt. Today's tour is powered by the Diarna Geomuseum, and we are extremely honored and privileged to have with us some unique guests. First of all, we have Professor Yoram Meital of Ben-Gurion University. Also joining us is the president of the Cairo Jewish community, Magda Haroun.
Hello.
Also joining us from Cairo will be Sammy Ibrahim, the president of the Drop of Milk Foundation. And joining from the United States will be Diarna's lead photographer, Joshua Shamsi, who conducted 2 research trips to Egypt, one in 2005 and one in 2017 with the assistance of Magda and Sammy. Hello, Josh.
Hello.
Joining us from Alexandria will be Zahra Adel, a well-known and knowledgeable Alexandrian tour guide who specializes in Alexandria's Jewish history.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
And last but not least, we have the executive director of the American Sephardi Federation, Jason Gruberman, who will be joining us as well.
Thank you.
So we'd like to begin with a brief video about what is the Diarna Geomuseum before we actually begin today. So hold on tight, here we go. I'm pausing it there. Unfortunately, apparently their sound is not coming through. So let me just take a second here. And let's try this one more time from the top. Thank you, everybody, for letting me know. Here we go, one more time. Hang on one second. Okay, let's try this one more time.
Welcome to the Diarna Geomuseum. Diarna means our homes in Judeo-Arabic. It testifies to a shared history which the forces of hatred are actively seeking to erase by spreading ignorance and destruction across the region. In 2014, after seizing Mosul, Islamic State fighters made a public spectacle of destroying the tomb of Jonah. Across the region, Christians and other minorities are subject to the same persecution once reserved for Jewish communities. The threat against our common cultural heritage is unprecedented. We are in a race against time. Diarna is leading an effort to preserve the history of once vibrant communities. Every day, synagogues, schools, and community buildings that defined Jewish life across the Middle East and North Africa are decaying or being destroyed. Take this beautiful synagogue in Damascus. It is known as the site where the prophet Elijah anointed his successor. This was in 2010. This is now. Thanks to Diarna's efforts to capture the images, the artifacts, and the oral histories, over 1,200 sites have been identified and are now accessible online. Diarna is the first geomuseum of its kind. With the help of volunteers from across the region, including Arabs, Persians, and Kurds, as well as people of all religious backgrounds, an intense effort is underway to capture visual and oral histories before it is too late. In order to follow developments in real time, Diarna has set up a situation room to oversee digital mapping, traditional research, and field expeditions that cross into conflict zones to document the remnants of our shared cultural heritage. Here, in northern Iraq, we are rediscovering an entire Jewish village. The local elders remember the names of the families that lived there. Here, we see what remains of the synagogue in Accra. And in Saudi Arabia, we discover a complex of forts belonging to an ancient Jewish tribe which played a pivotal role in early Islamic history. Deep in the labyrinths of Sana'a, Yemen, we document the vestiges of Jewish presence despite the chaos of an ongoing civil war. In other countries, peaceful environments allow us to render the full beauty of preserved sites. Witness the striking elegance of the Chaim Pinto Synagogue in Essaouira, Morocco. This is heritage worth preserving. At a time when extremists are on a rampage to destroy the past and spread ignorance, the Diarna Geomuseum is on a mission to preserve, protect, archive, and project the knowledge, the history, and the cultures which together form our identity. Visit us online, contribute your knowledge, join the community, and begin the voyage. Diarna, into the past, on to the future.
Today's talk is made in part, thanks in part largely to to materials captured by Diarna researchers on their trips to Egypt. But Diarna focuses on countries way beyond only Egypt. It focuses on the entire Middle East and North Africa. But let's jump in because today we're experiencing Egypt. And it's quite appropriate considering that in just a few nights from now, many of us will be doing the annual tradition of recalling our exodus from Egypt. Egypt as a country is located on the northern part of the African continent, and it borders the Mediterranean and it borders the Red Sea. It is so far east in North Africa that many don't even consider it part of North Africa proper, but rather it's more connected to the culture of the Levant and the eastern shore of the Mediterranean, including modern-day Israel, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. And Egypt is primarily desert, but the one area that is not desert is the area of the Nile Delta, basically the green area in the map on your screen. And it's basically from Cairo northwards, and it is the area of primary settlement for Egyptians today. And the main cities of settlement in Egypt include Cairo, Alexandria, Mansoura, and Port Said. Jews have lived in Egypt going back to biblical times. Abraham the patriarch went down to Egypt. His grandson Jacob went down to Egypt along with his children, his 70 people, and they turned into 600,000 men who left Egypt during the Exodus, as depicted here in this beautiful scene from the Ten Commandments. For those of you in New York, you were able to catch it last night on public television. But throughout, the Jewish settlement in Egypt did not end with the Exodus, because the Jews actually returned to settle in Egypt at the times of the prophets and even beyond. Most famously, you had Philo of Alexandria, who resided in Alexandria, Egypt, at the turn of the Common Era, and you had the Jewish garrison at Elephantine, way down in the south of Egypt. If Cairo is way up here in the north, Elephantine Island is way down here in the south. It was a military garrison, and they were most famously tasked with watching the Nilometer, or the Nilometer, which it basically tells you how much water is in the Nile, because that is what Egypt to this very day. So here is a picture of the settlement at Elephantine. And one of the reasons we know so much about the Jewish settlement at Elephantine is because of the many papyrus fragments and documents that they left behind. Nowadays, most of these papyrus are located at the Brooklyn Museum, and they're able to give you an inside look at the Jewish life on Elephantine Island. But Jewish life in Egypt wasn't confined to only the early years of settlement, but rather continued into the Middle Ages. Perhaps the most famous Egyptian Jew is Maimonides, Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. He was not born in Egypt. He was actually born in Spain, in Cordoba. This is the statue of him in Cordoba in 1138. And he subsequently fled Spain to Morocco, and then he subsequently moved further east all the way to Old Cairo. And to this day, there's actually a synagogue named in his honor in Old Cairo. Let's take a look. This synagogue is located in the Muski section of Cairo, or what's commonly known as the Harat al-Yehud, the Jewish quarter. And this synagogue has gone under a couple of changes over the course of different years. But this is the facade of the synagogue as captured by Diarna photographer Joshua Shamsi 2 years ago in 2017. And it says Bet Knesset Harav Moshe ben Maimon, and you have in Arabic as well. And then of course you have the two tablets above the entrance. But, and now here we are, we're gonna go inside, and I'm gonna invite Josh. Josh, as we look around the building in this picture, tell us what it is exactly that we're looking at here. Tell us, is this the way the building always looked?
I believe it was restored in 2010, but it was also 3 times between the 1920s and 2010. So exactly how this compares to the previous restorations in the original structure, I can't say. I think we have some pictures of the ruins of some of the previous versions. And Sammy, I believe someone that works with you actually designed and created the light fixtures. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
go ahead, Eddie.
This is the building as extant today. Anybody going down to Cairo, please let us know. It should still look like this. It should match 100% to our pictures. But the building right now, it's what we're looking at is the main sanctuary, but perhaps more stories about the building are connected to the basement, but we'll get there in a minute. The building, as Josh said, did not always look this beautiful. So this is a picture from many, many years ago. We see the original, the same facade has been kept, but as we look at this picture from the 1990s, it's not even that we're looking at the same building practically, because the changes are so wildly different. But then again, this shows you the approach that Egypt has taken to its Jewish heritage throughout the generations. And that when you go to the Muski section, you don't see this remnant of a synagogue, you actually see the synagogue that we just walked around in. But now here we go into the basement. And in the basement of the Maimonides synagogue in Cairo is where all the intrigue happens. So Josh, tell us what it is that the basement is famous for in the synagogue. What are we looking at in this picture?
So in this particular picture, there's a well. And in this picture, straight ahead is purportedly where Maimonides was interred after his death in 1204. And based on what I learned from Yoram Meital on my visit there in 2017, is that people from all backgrounds, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, all believed this to be a holy site, that Maimonides was a great healer, and people who wanted to come and pray for health would come here and even occasionally stay for a night. As for how long Maimonides was buried there and kept there is a subject of debate for some. You can continue there, Eddie.
Okay, sounds good. And I see that some people have raised their hands and asked questions. We will get to those in a minute. But continuing along Egyptian Jewish history, there are additional medieval Jewish sites throughout Cairo. And one of the most famous medieval Jewish sites is the one that we're going to go to now, the famous Ben Ezra Synagogue in Old Cairo. This synagogue is most famous for what was stored inside the synagogue, the Cairo Genizah, made famous by Solomon Schechter. As we take a look around the building, notice again the state that the building is in. Today, the Ben Ezra Synagogue is actually a protected antiquities by the state of Egypt. And to enter the site, one has to say hello to the Egyptian Antiquities Police, to the guards stationed outside the building. And depending on what time you're there, most likely pay a slight entrance fee. But let's take a look around. So as you notice in the picture, there seem to be some stanchions. Josh, you were there, you took this picture. Tell us what's happening, why are there stanchions in the shot here?
Well, because this site is under the jurisdiction of the Antiquities Department, there are a number of areas that even paying tourists are not allowed to go. And the spot from where I photographed this shot, this panorama, was one of them. And yeah, it was nice to be able to get this central perspective, to go up onto the to the area of the Ark and get some detailed shots, which people can check out on our website. But yeah, that's, and I don't know if people are allowed on the second floor, if paying visitors are allowed on the second floor. I also have some shots from there.
Nancy Thaler, I see you raise your hand. I'll get to you in just a minute once we finish this site. So Josh mentioned there is a second floor, and the second floor is actually most famous because of the little hole that existed on the second floor. And that little hole is where the shamash of the synagogue would put all the Genizah documents, the documents written in Hebrew generally, covering all sorts of subjects, ranging from sacred text to inventory lists sent from one merchant to another merchant. And they would throw them inside that hole until they were found and made famous by Solomon Schechter at the turn of the 20th century. Here, for example, is a page from a Haggadah that was taken out of the Cairo Genizah. And it says there, if you see on the left, and that is part of the Haggadah that many of us will be reading this coming Wednesday night. And here, of course, is a picture of Solomon Schechter with all the Genizah fragments. If you speak to any Genizah scholar today, they will perhaps shudder looking at this picture, as the fragments are strewn about all over his table, not wrapped in climate preserving document protectors, not in a very neat system. But this was how he did his research, which was later continued by his students and is continued to this very day. And you can look at Genizah fragments online through the Friedberg Genizah Project, FGP. You could throw that into Google. So before we do go on, I would like to take a second here and to answer some of the questions that came in. So I see here in the Q&A box, somebody asked the question, Deborah Sachs-Barsky asked, what shul is this? Perhaps that was a reference to the Maimonides synagogue in Cairo. Nancy Thaler asked, are there Torah scrolls in the arks? Sammy, are there Torah scrolls in the arks of the Maimonides synagogue?
Yeah, there is only one.
Only one synagogue. Okay, thank you. Nancy, I
No,
hope
only one Torah scroll in this synagogue, in the two synagogues.
one in each.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Nancy, for the question. One more question came in. Okay, very good. Thank you. Proceeding along, we're now going to head to another very ancient site in Cairo, and this is the Basatin Cemetery. This is perhaps one of the oldest cemeteries in the Jewish world.
I would say the second oldest after the Mount Olive.
Second oldest, even older than I thought. So, Sammy, tell me a little bit about the Basatin Cemetery. Tell us where is it in relation to the rest of Cairo today?
Yeah, practically the story with Basatin will start, I would say, started 1,150 years ago when the Sultan Ahmad bin Tulun have granted the Jewish community the space of, I would say, by the time it was approximately 70 hectares. That unfortunately with time, this was on the limit of Cairo. It was completely out of Cairo, and below the hill of Al-Muqattam. This land, through the 1,200 years, we had the time that you will have in part of Basatin, you will have 10 layers of tombs. And this is why, because we have a very famous sandy storm happen every year called Al Khamasin. And with each 70 or 80 years, the tombs have been covered by sand, and with the rain coming on the December and November will make them hard, and so the next generation will use the layer above. So how this have been discovered in the end of 1990, they decided to build the ring road, and they have to cross Basatin, and this was very bad things because it divided Basatin to two parts. And during the construction of the road, so we had a very estimated known organization called Havra Kadisha, yes, they came and they inspected the construction of a wall, the construction of a bridge crossing the Basatin, and they made sure that no of the tombs have been affected. But unfortunately, with every time there was a war between Israel and Egypt, Basatin have been attacked by squatters all over, and they start to rob all the marble that was covering the tombs there. So I think the worst period was during the spring, the Arab Spring. There was no really police force, there is no government, and so they took space and they attacked a lot of the spaces, but part of the wall who was covering, who was surrounding Basatin have been demolished. And if you see from the photo now here, this is, I would say, the western, the eastern part of Basatin. If you can see, Eddie here, you have a lot of cars. This was used as a garage, and the tombs were covered by dirt and by garbage. So what we did that, thanks to a delegation who came and visited President Sisi in 2019, at the beginning of 2019, the government started to evacuate all the squatters, and the Jewish community was asked to build the wall. I think it was it was really accomplished, seeing that we didn't had really a lot of resources by the time, but thanks to a few donors, anonymous donors, we managed to reconstruct the missing part of the wall, and to start a massive cleaning, especially the area below the ring road, because this was as you see, there was a lot of everybody who had the truck full of garbage didn't know where to throw it. The answer was very easy: go to the Jewish cemetery and throw it there. So we remove all this. You will see from the photos after, and now we are also, you see, for instance, this here, all this area have been cleaned, and all the squatters have been forced to leave and to evacuate. Now we're still working with Avra Kadisha, and now they're making a kind of.
I mean, excuse me to interrupt. All the buildings you see outside the wall are squatters and are unauthorized building built on top of tombs.
Yeah, because also I didn't. I've mentioned that the surface now, the remaining part, I would say 17 hectares. This is what remain of the 70.
It's 1/5. It's 1/5 of what it used to be.
Yeah. So practically, a lot of people are requesting to identify the tomb of their ancestor. Unfortunately, we are able to identify only 2,000 to 2,500 tomb. This is what have been left. You see here, after cleaning the same area, there's no cars, and all the squatters have been removed outside. So what we are working now on restoring the marble, not the marble, the limestones tombs. Unfortunately, we don't have a mean or have a way of identifying the names for the one who have been the marble have been stolen. But at least the place is kept clean and safe, and now nobody can enter without getting an authorization or permission from the Jewish community in Cairo.
Thank you, Sammy. And as he mentioned, you could actually see via satellite imagery, you could see years ago all the cars that were there. You could see them clearly parked on the satellite imagery. You could see them in this area on the eastern side, and in the satellite imagery taken more recently, there are no more cars there, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. It's one thing to hear about it and to see videos, but you can actually track the progress through the satellite imagery taken at different times. Cairo as a city was an extremely cosmopolitan and diverse city. While so far we've been discussing sites connected to the rabbinate Jews who followed the rabbis and they believed in the oral traditions, Cairo was also home to a centuries-old Karaite community. Karaites, or Bnei Mikra, were generally did not follow the teachings of the rabbi as brought down in the Mishnah and the Talmud. One of their most famous rabbis in Cairo was Moshe Dar'i, or Musa Dar'i. And now let's take a look at the Karaite synagogue inside Cairo. While the Karaite community in Cairo goes back centuries, even Maimonides and Sa'adja Gaon were writing polemics against the Karaites. This particular synagogue is at most 200 years old. And adjacent to it was a Karaite library, which we'll hear more about in just a minute. Inside the synagogue, the Karaites worshipped in a very different way, as we could see. There's no benches here. There are no seats for people to sit at. There are no pews. So I'm going to ask now Professor Yoram Meital to tell us a little bit about the Karaites of Cairo, about Musa Dar'i, the namesake of the synagogue, and a little bit about the building that we're looking at and the adjacent library. Professor Meital.
Okay, so I would thank you, Eddie. I would start just by two minor corrections. One, Moshe Dar'i was not a rabbi and not a chief rabbi. He was a poet of a medieval time, a very famous and prolific poet. And when in the 20th century, the Musa Dar'i, the synagogue, the new synagogue, was built and opened, the chief rabbi of the Karaite came with the idea to name the synagogue after the poet, this famous Moshe Dar'i. So this is one thing. The other thing, the synagogue is not, in fact, it was established, it was the land, the plot was bought at the beginning, very beginning of the 20th century, and it was inaugurated in 1933. So relatively talking, it's a new building, a new synagogue. Now, the story of the Karaite in Cairo, we should say a few words about the common life of Karaite and Rabbinate in the Jewish neighborhood, Harat el-Yahud. The Jewish neighborhood in the old section of Cairo was, in fact, the area where Jewish life, Karaite and Rabbinate, were lived as neighbors for hundreds of years. In fact, since the beginning of this city of Cairo in the 10th century. So the Karaite used to live near the Rabbinate. But at the beginning of the 20th century, something very significant, in fact, happened in Cairo. And with the economic boom of the time, the Jewish families start to leave, or they left the Jewish neighborhood, and they were going to a different section of the new capital, the new neighborhoods in the Egyptian capital, Cairo. One of the places that had attracted so many Jewish family, again, Rabbinate and Karaite, was a neighborhood called El Abbasiyah, especially sections of Adair, Sakakini, and if we look into the census of the 1920s and the 1930s, we can see that about 1/3 of the Jewish families in Cairo established their houses in this section of the city. So it became like the new Jewish quarter of mainly the middle classes families, and the Karaite had to think about the ritual, about a synagogue, about a place for worship God. They decided to establish this beautiful, very monumental building. And as you said, Eddie, their practices, their religion practices are different from the one that you can find in the Rabbinate. And one example is that they following exactly the words that appear in the Bible. This is why they call Bnei Mikra, as you said. And therefore, when they get into a synagogue, a holy place, they taking off their shoes to follow the very famous sentence when Moses faced God for the first time, and he heard the voice saying that take off your shoes, this is the holy place where you stand, right? So this very beautiful building the Moshe Deri synagogue has become like the central communal community center for the Karaite in Cairo.
Thank you. We're
And
now
here you can see the interior of this monumental. We can see the ark, the Chal. They do not have a bima or a platform like you find in a rabbinate synagogue, but you can see the Hebrew letters, the Ten Commandments, of course, the Star of David. So you have all around you have Jewish symbols within this beautiful structure, and they used to keep in one of the I would say rooms close to the ark. They used to keep some of the most treacherous manuscripts and rare books that this very unique community had preserved for over 1,000 years in this very same city, Cairo. At the beginning in the Jewish quarter, and later on they transferred most of this rare documentation, Jewish documentation, to the new synagogue, the Moshe Deri synagogue. What we see here used to be the court of the Karaite. It's a kind of a rabbinic court, but this is the Karaite court. Later on, when the community seized the very space, was transformed into a library. And here you can see this beautiful photo of the library, in which the Jewish community in Cairo spent a lot of efforts to collect the books and to catalog them. And the plan is to make them available to the public, especially to Egyptian students, to come to the library and to use this book and to be educated much more about this very unique, important historical community.
So, Yoram, you sent me this picture because
Right.
if anybody does a Google search on your name nowadays, they'll come up with one fantabulous article. Tell me a little bit about what we're looking at over here.
Okay, so we're looking into a part of the writings, the Ketuvim, the third part of the Bible. This manuscript was written in the year 1028, beginning of the 11th century. And it was waiting, it was the property of the Karaite community through all these medieval and modern times until very recently, about 3 years ago, we were working on a very intensive project in Cairo. We've been led by Magda Haroun, the president of the community, Sammy, Ibrahim, and I had the honor to participate in this, to document the synagogues, but we found a lot of Judaica and a lot of, I would say, historical treasures of this community. And one of this manuscript is exactly the book of Ketuvim. Again, if you look into the scholarship about Jewish Bible, Hebrew Bible of the medieval time, you will learn very, very fast that this is something very, very rare. Its significance is not less than the Geniza that you mentioned earlier here, and it goes back almost 1,000 years. We have the name of the scribe, we have details about the owners, and we have this beautiful, beautiful, here is just one example. Mind you, Eddie, we're talking about a manuscript of over 600 leaves or pages, 600. And this is very, very rare to find a manuscript from the 11th century in this condition and in this scope, so that you have hundreds of pages, and not like, unlike in the Geniza, where you have fragments, and you have, if you're lucky, you have a page that is not damaged. Here you have hundreds of pages that can be easily read. I guess that anyone here who read Hebrew can read it easily. And so we have a fantastic and very rare manuscript, and it is now the property of the Jewish community in Cairo. And it is very important to, if you allow me, Eddie, to add a sentence. What we have in mind, the vision about the future of this manuscript and many others, what we have in mind is the complete opposite of what you have just seen Professor Schechter sitting in Cambridge and looking into documents that originally been emptied out from the Geniza in the Ben Ezra synagogue. What we have in mind is the opposite: to keep everything in Egypt, to keep it in Egypt, to digitize the rare manuscript, that it will be available to Eddie and Jason and everyone who is interested in this. He can log on and read it, and of course for the use by scholars. But we are totally believe that our model is the opposite of the famous Geniza story. This is very valuable, no less than the Geniza, but we think that what we create here is that we can preserve, or we can speak about the future of this manuscript, even in a condition that you have very few Jews left or still live in Egypt.
Wonderful, thank you. I see that many people have raised their hands. I'm going to take a second here. If you did raise your hand and you have a question, please throw it into the question and answer box. And I will try to run through them. So Deba Meadows sent in a question. Do Jews live in Egypt currently? Which synagogue was recently renovated in the news? Was it one of the ones that we saw? So you're jumping ahead of us. We shall get to the one that was in the news in just a minute. And yes, there are still some Jews who currently live in Egypt. Adria Fiano asked, is it the older tombs that have survived?
No, it's depending. Sometimes when they were using a heavy piece of granite, so it was very difficult to remove it. So this is why it started. Sometimes also old tombs dating from the 18th century didn't have even been covered by marble, so they stayed at this. So there is no rules about it.
Okay. Gil Simon, Sion, sorry. Why did the Karaite synagogue have no benches or teva? Professor Meital, how come there are no benches?
They do not use benches or chairs. They used to have carpets all over the floor, and they were to sit and to bow during the praying. It is quite similar to what you can see in mosque, for instance, during the Muslim praying. And again, we have evidence about some chairs, but this is for the handicapped and for people who are very ill, very difficult for them. So they used to keep a couple of chairs in this hall. But the standard is that they pray by standing, bowing, and sitting on the carpet.
Thank you. There are additional questions that I see. We shall get to them in due time. We're going to take a second here and just progress through our tour because while Cairo is the capital of Egypt and the most populous city, there are many other cities beyond Cairo that are worthy of distinction and worthy of recognition. So we're going to take a step right now. We're going to step out of Cairo and we're going to step towards the east. We're going to go into the Delta and we're going to take a quick visit at the city of Port Said. Way there on the east, on the coast of the Mediterranean, is the city of Port Said. And this city is most famous and grew in size and importance with the creation of the Suez Canal, because this is one of the entrances to the canal. Here's a beautiful photo of the entrance to the canal. And here you can see the city literally growing because of the canal. And as a port city, Port Said was a center for immigrants, and there was a place that many immigrants moved to, especially with the opening of the Suez Canal and the changing of established patterns of trade and trade routes. Many Jews and others who were impacted by the changing trade routes sought to follow and find the new trade routes. And many of them, many Jews from the Ottoman Empire, many Jews from Syria, many Jews from Greece, people from Malta, from Cyprus, and even people fleeing the persecutions in the Russian Empire, they would all cross the Mediterranean and set up shop in Port Said. And one of the most famous buildings in Port Said, the first many people mall, the first building that is considered by many to be a mall, was actually the Simon Arst department store founded by the Eastern European Jew, Simon Arst. He was a Jew who fled persecutions in Eastern Europe, and he made his way to Port Said, where he established his business. Also residing in Port Said, besides for people from the other side of the Mediterranean, were other Jews from other parts of the Middle East and North Africa. There were 2 synagogues in Port Said. One catered to the Sephardic Jews, especially the Ladino-speaking Jews from the Ottoman Empire, from the Balkans, from Greece, and the other catered to the Arabic-speaking Jews from Yemen, from Iraq, from Syria, and other parts of Egypt. So the synagogue that we are looking at here, this is the Ohel Moshe synagogue, built by members of the Benin family from Aden, Yemen, and it was primarily used by people who spoke Arabic, be they from Egypt, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, or other parts of Egypt. While the other synagogue was built, Sukkot Shalom, was built by members of the Mayo family from Turkey, and it served the Ladino speakers. And this is a picture of the same building, Ohel Moshe, in the 1990s. The building was subsequently sold, and it is now the private residence of a citizen of Port Said. Okay, that was a little bit about Port Said and a little bit about some of the immigrants to Egypt. But there were immigrants to Egypt throughout the generations, throughout times. And one of the most famous immigrants to Egypt is somebody who didn't even go there planning to live there. It is somebody who simply was on his way from Morocco to the land of Israel because he wanted to spend the final years of his life in Eretz Israel and to be buried there. But unfortunately, he didn't quite make it. I am referring here to the tomb of Rabbi Yaakov Abu Hatzera, Rabbi Yaakov Abu Hatzera from Morocco, the author of the Abir Yaakov, who is buried in Damanhur, Egypt, in the Delta, not far from Alexandria.
Thank you, Eddie. So the Abu Hatzera family is a very, very interesting family, as the name means, literally master of the mat. As there's this story told that the Abu Hatzeras, one of their ancestors, took a magic carpet ride. They are believed to have originated in Syria, and we have the grave of one of their ancestors, Shmuel al-Baz, in Damascus. And then they went to Morocco. Whether or not they flew on a magic carpet to Morocco, we don't know. But they ended up in Morocco on the edge of the Sahara and built up this spiritual patrimony through mysticism, and became very, very famous and revered. And the Abir Yaakov for his writings. And then at an advanced age, he set off on a pilgrimage to the land of Israel. He made it as far as Damanhur, and he was there long enough to become known as a wali, or holy man, for everyone. Jews, Christians, Muslims, all revered him. And when he passed away, his shrine became the only major Moroccan pilgrimage site in Egypt. And for generations, people would come on what's known as the Hilula, or the anniversary of his death, to celebrate his memory and his teachings. In modern times, due to geopolitical issues, that wasn't possible until after Camp David. And then thousands of people would pour into Egypt every year to visit the shrine. You're seeing the inside now of the grave, and it's believed that it's their student graves next to his. In recent years, that's become more and more difficult, as we'll hear in a moment from Josh Shamsi, who took this picture. There was a campaign led by the Muslim Brotherhood and other factions, to leftist factions, to shut down the pilgrimage. They succeeded in getting various levels of restriction added to the shrine, so people couldn't visit year-round. They could only visit during the Hilula. There were restrictions on how many people could visit. Usually, President Mubarak would allow access granted at the last minute, so a few people could come in. But in the end, it was completely shut down after terrorists threatened to attack the pilgrims. And then under the Morsi regime, this was obviously not going to change. What did change, however, and curiously, is that the shrine was completely restored. The Abu Hatzera family has very strong connections with the number of Ashkenazi philanthropists, and they are the ones who made this happen. Specifically, the family of Ira Renner, who paid for the restoration. And these pictures now are actually from a Brotherhood photographer, showing that the partial restoration of the shrine, and we even have some video of the shrine being fully restored. So now I'm going to hand it over to Josh, who actually visited the shrine in a proto-Diarna expedition to Egypt, and was detained in the process of doing so.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, that's right. In 2005, a colleague and I, kind of on a whim, after a friend had visited us in Israel, where we were both living at the time, showed us photographs of synagogues and a little bit of this shrine while we were living in Israel. We decided on a whim to go and check things out. We were warned that maybe we should coordinate with the government and let them know that we were coming, but being a little bit naive, we thought we didn't have to do that. So upon arriving at the shrine, we were met by some plainclothes police officers and federal officers who are simply stationed there. One of the things that I've noticed in both of my visits to Egypt is that the government takes their role very seriously to protect all of the Jewish sites. And the Abu Hatzera shrine in Damanhur, being controversial, as Jason just described, was very heavily guarded, despite being in a somewhat remote location. So when we arrived, we were detained, taken to a police station, kept there for 3 or 4 hours. And this was this was the same year, in fact, and just after the murder of Daniel Pearl. So, it was a tense moment for us. We weren't sure exactly what was happening. I think it was tense all around. I think both for us and the government. The government wasn't sure who we were and needed to make sure that we weren't there to damage or destroy the shrine. And they were also concerned for us because, as Jason described, people were only allowed to come for the Hilulot, otherwise they weren't allowed, and they didn't want anything happening to us. So, we were allowed to photograph for about 5 minutes, and we were able to say a prayer, and then they took us by local escort, police escort, to the city limits, where they transferred us to a federal escort, and they accompanied us all the rest of the way to Alexandria. So that was my experience. And then on my site, that was in 2005. And then on 2017, we were working, we had learned our lesson and, got in touch with the government far ahead of time. We're working in partnership with the oversight of the General Intelligence, Egypt's General Intelligence. They made it too risky for us to go. So we didn't make it there in 2017.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt here?
Pardon me?
Can I interrupt into this just slightly to add something out of my experience? So I've been working on the Jewish community in Egypt, I would say since the mid-1980s. And my experience is different. I have never stopped by any authority. I was never asked intriguing questions. I've been working with, especially during the past 3 or 4 years now, working with Magda and Sammy. We could have not done anything without the support that we're getting from the authorities. And this is very, very important for us, not to create this, I would say, impression that what we are doing is a kind of a secret mission and someone is following us or not. No, not at all. It is the opposite. The opposite, from my experience. It's not that I'm saying that Josh has not went through this experience. I'm saying just sharing my experience. My experience is that, and this is very important, I think, to emphasize, that over the last, I would say, 7-8 years, a significant shift has taken place in perceptions of the Jewish communities on both levels, the authorities and the public in general. And this is, Eddie, something that is of historical shift, because we have known quite a lot about the old days and the story that we heard about it, but this is not the reality today. Of course, if you are come with a big camera and with a team, and you go without even, taking the needed permits, and it's a mess. It can be a mess, but there is a way to work in Egypt and in Morocco and in Tunisia and other places, and it is easily can be arranged. It can be arranged. I can tell you that the three of us, Maggie and Sammy and me, we have documented all the synagogues, any and each of them, and we've been getting support and sympathy and empathy. And Eddie, you know what? Even the security, they were asking us questions not about what you are doing here, but about Jewish past, about the life of these communities, about, they asked me, you are a historian, tell us more about this past, We would like to know more, okay? So I think it is important for our audience to understand that I'm not here to paint anything rosy. It's not the issue. But without this significant shift that has taken place, we could have not do anything even close to even taking Diarna and our dear friend Josh to go with us to the synagogues. We were able to do this because things has changed, and we get this support, and no one is actually, like it's not a James Bond mission. It is not.
No, you need only.
Thank you so much.
Let me read something, if I may. Even for us as the Drop of Milk Association, if we compare, and Yoram can confirm what I'm saying. If you compare when we started 4 years ago to now, it's completely different. It have been evaluated. So even with the government, with the police force, more and more they understand our mission and they respect it and they want to help. And the police guarding the synagogue are more to protect than to stop us from entering there.
Thank you, Sammy. Thank you, Professor Meital. And I think that's the exact segue that we needed to go to the next site.
Eddie?
Yes, Jason.
Oh, if I could just add something, I just want to thank Professor Meital and Sammy for adding this. And yeah, and that's Josh has the full experience. I mean, he was there, more than 10 years ago, and had this experience. And then more recently, he was designated, his mission was very well treated, working with you, working with Sammy, working with Magda. And in my own experience in Egypt, I was able to, as part of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, we met with President Sisi, and he was very interested and very sympathetic and very supportive of everything we were trying to do, including about Daman Hor and making it accessible again. So absolutely 100% what you said, Professor Meital, is very important to accentuate that Egypt has made a sea change and is going in the right direction, and we should thank our friends in the Egyptian government for everything they are doing.
Absolutely. Let me chime in a second time. I think I tried to make a couple of efforts to say that my first visit was totally naive and on a whim, and I didn't coordinate anything. And eventually, even though we did arrive without announcing ourselves, they did eventually let us go. They just wanted to, check out who we were, that we weren't a risk, and that we weren't endangering ourselves either. And that for sure, if the correct channels are accessed, then there isn't much that can't be accessed.
About the Hilula of Abu Hasira, I would like to add something. You have to bear in mind that the site in Damanhur is a very popular area. It's not like Cairo or Alexandria. And when pilgrims would come to Abu Hasira with alcohol, especially the Hasidic, chanting and dancing and drinking, it was very shocking to the population there. It's not in the daily life or the daily habits to drink and sing. And I must say, even for us Sephardic Jews from Egypt, we are not used to this kind of celebration. So it's the people of Damanhur who asked the government to shut down this site. And there was a court case done against the Ministry of Antiquities. The Jews were not involved in this. It's the people from Damanhur who asked the government to shut down this site because they were not happy with what was going on, according to them. And they won the case. They won the court case. This is something I just wanted to add.
And now also another thing, unfortunately, this is belong to the Jewish community in Alexandria, and they didn't thought about appealing this court sentence.
No, they were not part of the court case, Sammy. It was the people from Damanhur against the government, against the Ministry of Antiquities.
Mm-hmm.
That was a perfect segue. And as we were all discussing the changes that have been happening in the Egyptian government, there is no building that exemplifies this more than the building that we'll visit right now. There was a question asked earlier, what is the building that I've been seeing on the news that was just restored? That is the one and only Eliyahu Hanavi Synagogue in Alexandria, Egypt.
Yes.
And I would like to actually take this opportunity to introduce another member of our panel here, Al-Zahra Adel, sorry, a tour guide in the Alexandria region who focuses extensively on the Jewish community in Alexandria and the surrounding. So
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Nice meeting all of you here and joining your amazing presentation.
Thank you so much. Before I ask you a question, I just want to invite everybody to take a look at the slide that they're looking at on their screen. You can see the Eliyahu Hanavi Synagogue in the center of your screen. It is a tremendous building in the middle with the brown tablets on top of it. But if you look around it, you see additional icons that are not buildings. You see a green book and you see two menorahs. And those signify other communal buildings which were located in proximity to the Eliyahu Hanavi Synagogue. The green book represents the Jewish school, which was behind the synagogue. And the two blue menorahs, one represents the office of the Alexandria Rabbinate, which was literally a stone's throw from the synagogue, and the other represents the communal sukkah site in Alexandria. So the Eliyahu Hanavi Synagogue in Alexandria was not just a synagogue, it was actually a centerpiece for the community. And with that, I'm actually going to ask Al-Zahra, we're looking at the building. This is a picture from 2017, before the Egyptian government began its work. But tell us a little bit about the history of this synagogue.
Okay, concerning the synagogue, it was not just a synagogue, as we just have said. It's the center for all the Jewish community in Alexandria here. We had in Alexandria 14 synagogue, which is, unfortunately, we just have two right now, which is Menashe Synagogue, which is in Menshea, dates back to 1860, and Eliyahu Hanavi, which is the current building itself dates back to about 1900, or mainly 1880, 1900. And we have a small chapel at the Mazarita Cemetery, which is considered as a small kinis or small synagogue. The synagogue, as you already have mentioned, we have the School of Agion, which is a building behind here in the photo. We have the court, which still exists so far, the Rabbinate building. And we also had the old Maccabi club, which is part of it still exists, which is the empty part behind the synagogues. It used to be the playground for the basketball for the Alexandria community. The synagogue originally dates back to 14th century, which is 1354, when they decided to build the synagogue here. And the story started by when we had a rabbi have already a dream about the prophet Daniel, have already appeared for him the dream. And once he already have seen the dream, said, I will build in the same place of my house a synagogue. It was built and kept the biggest synagogue so far. And after that, in about 1380, they built the other synagogue, which is Zaradil, which is unfortunately, it's not existing anymore. And later on, during the time of Napoleon Bonaparte, in about 1798, the synagogue was bombed and it was totally destroyed. In about 1850, during the time of the family of Muhammad Ali Pasha, especially during the son of Muhammad Ali Abbas Helmi I, they decided to build a new synagogue in the same site of the old synagogue. But nobody cared about showing the old drawing of the synagogue, how it would look like. And it was kept from 1850 till 1880. And later on in 1880, they decided to build a bigger building and they started to do some enlargement, which was totally completed in about 1910, and it was designed by Italian architect, and all the work made by an Egyptian company. The synagogue used to be the biggest synagogue in all over Alexandria, used to have more than 700 people use the synagogue, and it was 2 floors. First floor, which is where we still have the seats still today. The second floor for ladies, and for the shwar, or mainly for a special concert done during the synagogue. The area is about 4,200 meters. We have the column, which is all of them Italian style, looks like the basilica, and we have the bima, everything still intact till 2016. when we had some collapsing for the ceiling of the synagogue. And they decided at the time for the Egyptian government to pay for taking care of the synagogue, and it was renovated starting from 2017. And this was a real surprise. While they were working to renovate the synagogue, they discovered the original old synagogue still intact. Just not intact, let's say the foundation is still intact, which is the old bima, the old staircase, the old border of the old synagogue, which is right now open for public, and everyone can visit how it was look like. The synagogue was just renovated and was open starting from the 10th of January, and we were very lucky to have the first Shabbat here in February, 14th of February. It was very emotional for everyone. Just to, after 60 years to come here, it was almost 180 to 100 people came all together to have the first Shabbat, which is, I cannot tell you how it was so exciting and so emotional for everyone.
Thank you. And we're actually going to begin looking at some of the pictures that you sent me that you took yourself earlier this year.
Yeah.
And what is that in the middle that we're looking at with the metal poles?
Here, this is the facade of the synagogue. The synagogue, as you see here, we have the stand window, all original, and you will find the star on the top, and you will find the main language was, we have everything in French and in Hebrew. The synagogue of Alexandria, it's a little bit, we always have in Alexandria, we had the Sephardic synagogue, we had Ashkenazis, this synagogue for everyone. So it was for Mizrahi, for Sephardic, for Ashkenazi, and for Emenet, mainly for many Greek Jew who came from Corfu. This was also the place for them.
Fantastic.
And we have here to the left-hand side, this is a staircase leading to the second floor. And behind, as you see, you can have the school. And we had the last renovation in the rail, which is made by Dr. Maxi Salama, who was the ex-head of the Jewish community of Alexandria.
And this project was undertaken by the Egyptian government.
And the Ministry of Antiquities.
And what was the cost on this project?
64 million Egyptian pounds.
64 million Egyptian pounds. And
paid by the Egyptian government.
Wow, that's a nice number.
And everyone were working there were Egyptian, Muslim, Christian, everyone. By the way, here Alexandria is so cosmopolitan city, and everyone is very proud to say that Alexandria had the biggest Jewish community. And we are so happy. I cannot tell you that when the synagogue started to be under restoration, everyone were happy and everyone very interested to go to visit and to have service. It's for us a part of a religious building. It's also the culture of Alexandria.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. And if you're looking closely at the pictures, you could actually see that while they maintained the chandeliers, the candelabras, they actually shined them up, while in the earlier pictures they were seen in black. Here
What
they are
happened
gilded.
during maintaining, which is something so interesting. If you already have seen the old photo, you will find the chandelier and you will find everything used to be black. And they didn't know that the original color were golden color. So while they were cleaning, they discovered already layers of painting the original color, which is a golden one, as you see right now.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So before we do finish up for today, we're actually going to go back to Cairo. We're going to go back to Cairo, one more place in Cairo, and we're actually going to take a look at the Sha'ar HaShamayim, or the Adley Street Synagogue in downtown Cairo. This synagogue is built in a neo-Pharaonic style. We'll ask for a definition of neo-Pharaonic in just a minute. But here, let's first take a look at the building and figure out where exactly it is. It is actually not far from Tahrir Square. It is really downtown in the center of the city. So here, let's go inside and take a look. Here's the front gate to the synagogue. And behind the synagogue, there was a library with many rare books as well. Here is the key to enter into the synagogue. And as we look around, I'm going to ask Magda Haroun, please tell us a little bit about the synagogue, a little bit about its history, a little bit about where it is today in terms of the community and how it functions today.
Well, the synagogue was built in the beginning of the 20th century by the Kapawi family. It is the most central and the biggest synagogue in Cairo. It is the one that is used until today for high holidays, for celebrations. As I don't know if you have photographs of the synagogue from outside, but it's a huge building, Art Deco, but from outside it's a pharaonic style. And if you imagine this building at the beginning of the 20th century when it was built, without all the surrounding buildings, you can see how imposing it was, how majestic it was, and you can feel that this Jewish community was very well established, not afraid of tomorrow. You have on the chairs, you have names of the most prominent Jewish families. They used to buy the chair and put the name on it on a brass tag with the name, and it was this chair was inherited in the whole family. Still, it has been renewed in 2000 I think in 2000 it was restored. It is still intact with all the lighting, the carpets. We have how many Torahs we have, Sammy? I think 30, more than 30 Torahs in the Echal. And it is used today. We use it for prayers, and we use it sometimes as a community, a cultural center. We have film screenings to keep this place alive. We receive visits from students, school students, university students. It is a way to explain to them how integrated Jews were in the Egyptian society, that we are not very different from any other Egyptian citizen. I mean, it's very amusing when I receive students from university. It's the first time they see a Jew when they meet me. So they are very eager to see me and to have photographs with me, as I'm one of the last Jews of Egypt. I mean, so I call myself the last dinosaur. And they are very happy. They have lots of questions to ask. I don't feel any animosity. And I think when these people, they go home and they talk to their parents and tell them we visited the synagogue and we met with the Jew, and she's not different from us. It brings people together, and it will make them understand that this heritage that we're leaving behind. We have 12 synagogues in Cairo, and 2 libraries. They're not functional now, but they will be very soon when we have the means to do it. It's all theirs. It's our heritage. It's the heritage of Egypt, and they will learn how to preserve it.
Thank you, Magda. And this is, for everybody looking at the picture, this is the view from the balcony.
From the ladies' section. Yes.
Exactly, from the ladies section up above. And the photo that we saw just a moment ago was taken by, again, our photographer, Joshua Shamsi. And Josh, are you there? So Josh, I just want to ask you a little bit, as we are looking at this video, what was it like taking photos inside this Shara Shamayim synagogue?
I would say for the Shar HaShamayim and the Eliyahu Hanavi, one of the first things that's really difficult to convey just in one photograph is both the scale of the building, but also the number of buildings and spaces that there are in these compounds. You know, between the sanctuary and the courtyard and the administrative buildings and all of the other buildings, it's hard to convey how much of a hub these places are for the communities and all of the different kinds of activities that take place there. But also, with respect to the Shar HaShamayim synagogue, I think you can tell from these pictures, even from a distance, how much detail there is in just about every facade and piece of furniture and light fixture there are. It's really it was a pleasure to photograph there because there's so much to look at and so much to really visually indulge in. So it was really wonderful to walk around there. I mean, it took a while, but you know, to really try and convey all of the detail. And you know, Yoram, while we were there, described a lot of the significance of each of the details, and he did a really nice job explaining, a really beautiful job explaining how the different design elements incorporated into this space reflected a people who saw themselves both as a part of contemporary society, represented by a lot of the modern motifs that they employed, but also, if you look at the columns, for example, that there were references to, you know, the ancient Beit HaMikdash and some of the significance as a Jewish, especially Jewish community, and not just a contemporary one.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I must say that, Josh, you did such a wonderful job that they look like they don't need restoration.
And much cheaper than a restoration. And actually,
Yeah, no, the miracle was not in Shar HaShamayim. It was another in synagogue, Hanan one. Hanan.
Right.
Yeah.
So as we come to the end of our tour today, I hope everybody enjoyed their experience of Egypt. I actually want to take a second here and step back from our perspective for a second bit and ask a bit of a different question to our panelists. We have here a very diverse panel of people representing both the community in and interacting with sites in Cairo, interacting with sites in Alexandria. We have the outside perspective of a scholar who's intimately connected to the workings of the community. And we also have a photographer. And I want to ask, what is the status now and the status going forward of Egyptian Jewish heritage sites? Is its future going to be very cloudy, or is there a bright horizon coming for Egyptian Jewish heritage sites? Is what happened in Alexandria a sign of things to come, or do we know of things going in a different direction? So I want to ask everybody here to weigh in. So I'll start with you, Maggie.
I will tell you something. In terms of restoration, I think we cannot talk now. I think the whole world is going to go into a terrible economic crisis. That restoration Jewish heritage in Egypt will not be one of the priorities. But maintaining the Jewish heritage is a priority. It is a priority, and I really felt it when I attended the official opening of the Alexandria synagogue, when they said that the official acknowledged that the Jewish heritage is part of the Egyptian heritage. I had tears in my eyes because it's the first time we have been officially in words acknowledged, and all what we are doing with Yoram and Sammy, working on the cemetery, working on the library, cleaning the synagogues, opening them for visit by appointment. but opening them, it is giving us hope that yes, now a lot of people, first of all, they're talking about the Jews of Egypt. Nobody was talking about the Jews of Egypt until the past 6-7 years. We are the forgotten Jews. We are really the forgotten Jews. Now people are talking. The young generation is eager to know a lot about its Jews, the Egyptian Jews. Lots of interviews with students. A lot of them make their final end of year project about the Jewish community, about the drop of milk. We have on our Facebook page, we have a lot of people who want to come and join us to preserve because they feel it's their heritage. And this is something that we accomplished, and it makes me very confident. And we have a lot of work to come, to do, a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Maggie. And Zahra, I want to go to you, get the perspective in Alexandria. Where do you see the future of the Jewish heritage in Alexandria?
Well. I cannot hear you well. Yeah, I can't. Okay.
Try that one more time. What is your take on the future of the Egyptian Jewish heritage in Alexandria?
Very proud. First of all, the people are so keen to know. People so keen to understand what's happening and about the history of the Jewish community. I cannot tell you what's happening when I go to the Jewish cemetery and I found a grave for some of the very famous people who already, we have many names already called by the street till today, like Minasha, for example, like Pento, like, so when I tell to everyone and make lecture about that, everyone, oh, have you already have seen the grave? If is it in good condition? Have you cleaned them? So everyone is so keen to understand. Everyone is so keen to cooperate, to keep the heritage alive. And everyone's so proud to say that we are one. Muslim, Christian, and Jews, there is no difference. So this is mainly the main aim for the new generation so far.
Great. Professor Meital, I want to turn to you with the same question.
Okay, I would say very briefly that I'm very optimistic about the future of the Jewish past, especially in Egypt, but not only in Egypt, in Morocco, in Tunisia, even in Bahrain. I don't know if you're aware of this. There are 3 minyans, synagogues in Bahrain today. So why I'm optimistic? I'm optimistic because I do see that a significant shift has taken place and continue for several years now. So it's not something that you have a peak and after several months or maybe a year, it has stopped. The opposite, it continues. I would like to follow up on exactly what Magda had said about the change or the shift in the interest of the people. First and foremost, look into the people. The people. I'm not to say there are no others who oppose. There is an opposition. There are some others who are against this, but we do see a significant change, I would say, deep within the Egyptian society. All generations, young and seniors, and in addition to this, we do have a change in, I would say, a significant change also within the governmental level. You know, the different sections, the different ministries, and if I would say, it comes from the top of the pyramid of power. The message is clear. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has talked in several occasions on the need for more tolerance, and the more tolerance can be translated also to the point of how to deal with the Jewish issue or Jewish side. So the bottom line here is that the shift within the society and within significant parts of the regime apparatus, to my mind, it's historical. It is important. Now, there is one major question that we cannot ask today. Sorry, we can ask, but we cannot answer today. And this is how to keep this momentum going on, especially in the circumstances that we all have no choice but to face. Okay, so the crisis with the corona virus and the impact on so many levels in our life will also impacting the work in Arab countries or other places with regarding the Jewish heritage. So to me, this evening, the most, I would say, complex question to be addressed is how to keep with this momentum. And I can share here and say that my dearest friend Magda and Sammy, we already start asking ourselves this question, and we're trying to develop a kind of answers. It will take time. It will take time, and we need a lot of help. And we would like to reach out to people, to our audience, and to you guys to reach out and to say that the momentum can be kept, but we need more hands into this to make it feasible.
Thank you.
May I ask something? What we are doing here is a pioneer project for all Arab countries. We have been approached by people in Sudan. They want to know what we are doing because they want to preserve the Jewish heritage in Sudan, in Libya. So it is starting. It is starting. We are the leaders, and a lot of people will follow, I hope.
Oh, great. Thank you. Sammy, I want to ask you a little bit about Drop of Milk and some of the work that Drop of Milk is doing for Egyptian Jewish heritage going forward, and at least for maybe not immediate future, given all the corona problems, but what is on the agenda?
I'm very optimistic, sorry. As soon as we finish with the corona, we'll start.
Sammy, you can say I'm an optimist.
I'm optimist, yes. As soon as this corona issue will finish, we have a lot of demand of Egyptian who want to join our association. You cannot imagine. Now we are approximately 30 in the 30s members. But once we will open the door, I think easily we can attend 200. So can you imagine 200 person in a society like the Cairo one seeking to get Egypt back to this cosmopolitan environment. This cosmopolitan environment was the one who allowed us to see a one-of-a-kind synagogue reflecting the power of the Jewish community in the beginning of the 20th century. So as I said, I think we are on the right track. We are in the halfway. We cannot go back. We have to keep on going. Our mission just started.
Great, thank you. I'd like to give Jason Guberman and Joshua Shamsi any last thoughts before we conclude today. Joshua Shamsi, how about you?
No, I think everyone's covered it. But thanks.
Okay, Jason.
Thanks, Eddie. No, I just wanted to thank everyone, Shukranawi, to all our friends in Egypt, and to Professor Meital, and to Josh, and to you, Eddie, for a great job today. Yeah, Egypt is definitely not a James Bond country, but we do have other countries that Eddie has works with people on the ground that are difficult to document, and that we are happy to present that material in future tours. And so please stay tuned and keep us in touch. And for everyone who will be observing Passover, Pesach Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Thank
Chag
you.
Sameach, thank you.
Before we finish, I do have a couple of questions left in here, and basically the questions are on the same line. What is the current size of the Egyptian Jewish community today? That is basically the question in a nutshell. I have Eitan Mizrahi and Nancy Thaler who asked the same question. So, Sammy and Magda?
Let's say you can count them on your hands.
In 2 hands.
2 hands.
2 hands. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining us on this afternoon's virtual tour to Egypt. I hope everybody enjoyed their experience.
But it's the memory that persists.
It is the memory that persists. Thank you, Magda.
Yes.
I want to take this opportunity one more time to thank all our wonderful panelists, Professor Meital, Magda Haroun, Sammy, Ibrahim, coming to us from Cairo. I want to thank Joshua Shamsi coming to us from America, Jason from America, and Zahra Adel coming to us from Alexandria. Thank you for all lending your expertise and your insight to today's talk. It was
Thanks a lot, and thank you, Sammy and Mrs. Magda for letting me joining this amazing presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.